What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and welcome back to another episode of Poker Hands. And today we're going to be breaking down a classic high-stakes poker hand with Tom Dwan that you probably remember.
When you won, you didn't say, okay, go ahead. You give it to me right
Dwan's in. David's in.
We're going to have two bets. One 10,000 for February.
Ellie's in.
Wow, here we go, huh?
Simple.
Ziggy's in.
For the summer.
Okay. Cool, right?
You should at least make it like 11,000 for the summer, so that you can be up 1,000.
Is the difference. Is
Six.
Wait, family pot.
Right.
It is family pot.
Right.
He's not going to want to.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Oh my God.
We have an eight-handed pot.
Eight-handed pot.
Bing bang. He's
Yeah,
got
it's
the
the
whole
first
gang.
tonight.
Well, tonight, yeah.
You guys want to chop?
Who opened this pot that got 7 callers? That's all I want.
Barry can't be comfortable getting so many callers.
Our hand begins at 400, 800 with a $200 ante each, I believe. So we have a lot of money out there to kick off the hand. And we got a lot of classic characters in the mix. We got Daniel Negreanu. We got Peter Eastgate, a WSOP main event runner-up from a few years ago, or more like a decade ago. We've got Zygmunt. We've got Tom Dwan. We've got David Benjamin. I mean, we got Elia Lesra. These are all names that you probably have heard of. And frankly, you might have already watched this episode. The action kicks off with Barry Greenstein opening up pocket aces. That is definitely approved to open up. Then the floodgates start to open. Barry makes it 2,500 to go. Tom Dwan next to him calls with the queen 10 of clubs. You could maybe argue to re-raise this every now and then. I would probably be mainly 3-betting in this position with so many players behind, but a call doesn't seem too bad every so often as well. Benjamin now next up, pocket threes. I could really go for a fold or a call either way with the threes here. Don't mind either action. Calling, of course, seems reasonable. Then people really start to get in the mix with Elia Lesra deciding to call with just Jack 9 off here. This is way too loose. You got to be mucking this. Plenty of players behind that can squeeze. You're going to be dominated with a lot of the hands that you do hit. Simply a too-weak hand for you to continue. And now Zygmunt with the 7-6 off. I mean, we're clearly in folding territory, but maybe he's just thinking we're deep. A lot of these guys are not maybe great post-flop. Maybe I can maneuver around. However you want to dice it, though, this is definitely a hand you would want to be letting go. It is a bad pre-flop hand. Now Negreanu on the button, king 4 of diamonds. This is a much more reasonable spot to play your hand. You've got a suited king. There are tons of people in there. There's less chance of squeezing, and you do have the button, so you're going to get to go last post flop. I think in this situation with king 4, I don't mind calling or maybe every now and then putting in a 3-bet, especially if you're going to have people calling with this kind of junk to your right. 3-bet squeezing is going to get better and better. Would not have worked here, though, with Barry Greenstein having aces, and maybe part of the dynamic at the table is that people think Barry is too tight and they're trying to crack his aces, and oh boy, are they trying to with all of these hands. Regardless, I do like coming along for a call here on the button in Negreanu's shoes. Now to the small blind, Peter Eastgate looks down at 4 deuce off. I mean, clearly this is a fold. This is one of your worst possible hands you can have. So, not too much to talk about. Ooh, see what I did there? 2-2-2 is going to become relevant later, guys. Anyway, Eastgate does make the call. Now the action on the big blind. Not too many hands you're going to want to be folding 8-way here, getting an incredible price. And Brunson looks down at the ace-9 off. Definitely a hand that's going to have enough pair value to want to take a flop. Anyway, Doyle does make the call, and we have an 8-way family pot to the flop. Let's go ahead and take a flop.
A 10 and 2 deuces on the flop.
Yeah. Peter Eastgate's flopped 3 deuces.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good flop for Barry. He wants to see what's going on.
That's 10,000.
Dwan's got 10s with the queen kicker. But he's also got 7 people behind him. And Barry's fired a continuation bet.
You know that was a Gale Sayers, don't you? That was a Gale Sayers.
Dwan's going to raise to 37,300.
I don't know what he's doing. He's got to know that Barry's really got a hand here. It's possible with 8 players in the hand that somebody has a deuce, like Peter Eastgate. So I don't understand why Dwan would raise that much money. But Peter Eastgate seems a little intimidated by the raise.
And he's going to call.
He just calls. And now what's Barry going to do with his aces? Barry calls. It's turning out to be a very interesting hand.
Yeah.
The flop comes 10 deuce deuce rainbow. Let's go ahead and take inventories for what we've got here. So we see Eastgate now in the lead with 3 of a kind. Greenstein still has aces, which generally speaking would feel pretty good in a flop like this, but when you're 8-way, there's definitely a chance someone has a set. We've got top pair here for Dwan, and everyone else has basically missed. And we have a little under pair action for Benjamin, but more or less everyone else doesn't have too much here on the flop. At this point, Barry decides to go ahead and bet $10,000. This is a little less than half pot in the flop. I'm really not a huge fan of this bet. I think if you do bet here, it needs to be really small, because when there are 8 people in the pot on the flop, basically there's just a much more likely chance someone has a deuce, and players should not feel like a 10 is a very good hand here, because there are 8 players to the flop and there are a ton of people that can have a 10 beat. Because of that, I actually don't think you can bet almost anything in Barry's shoes. I might even go ahead and check my entire range. If you want to bet a couple of hands, maybe you bet a hand like jacks for protection. Maybe you bet a hand like ace deuce suited to try and build some value. Maybe you bet a hand like pocket 10s or pocket 2s. But realistically, almost all hands are going to want to check here on the flop, because it's just too likely that someone has a deuce if you get action. This is where the hand really heats up. Greenstein bets $10,000, and now Dwan springs to life, raising on the flop to $37,000. I don't think I would want to raise almost anything here in Dwan's shoes, because essentially when you don't have a deuce, it's much more likely someone has one. And then additionally, there are very, very, very few hands you would want to raise with. Pocket 2s should probably not even be calling here under the gun +1. In these games, it's probably safe to assume that he would have pocket 2s. But regardless, there's basically one value hand that Tom Dwan can have. If you do have pocket 10s, you want people in there. Let them in with a deuce. Let someone check raises. Let someone rep the deuce. Let people build this pot. So I think with this many people left behind you, you just either have to call or fold. You have to play extremely tight. I think with queen 10 of clubs, you should just be folding. To be fair to Tom Dwan, it does make some sense here to raise as a bluff when you have a 10, because when you have 1-10, there's not only one combination of pocket 10s out there instead of 3, and it's unlikely people are going to want to put in too much money here unless they have either a very strong deuce or they have a full house or quads. So really, in Tom's shoes, the only hands you're particularly afraid of are if someone has pocket 10s or if someone has pocket 2s, and even with 8 people, that's just 2 combinations, and Barry Greenstein's unlikely to have either. When Tom does decide to raise to $37,000, which I do also feel like is a little bit too big, there's going to be plenty of streets to pump this pot up and try and get all the money. But regardless, when he makes it $37,000, pretty easy folds across the board in front of the table until it gets to Peter Eastgate. With a deuce here facing this action, it's actually already pretty scary, I would say. I mean, realistically, when Tom Dwan raises with 6 people behind, there are a myriad of deuces that people can have. Tom could have ace deuce. Tom could have 10s. Tom could have well, he can't have pocket deuces when you have a deuce, but he can have these value hands. And so it's actually already getting pretty dicey for Eastgate. One thing to note here is that when you flatten the small blind, you really shouldn't have a deuce all too often. So it is sort of sneaky pre-flop to be able to have a deuce. But when it goes bet raise and you cold call, not really the case anymore. I do think I would only have calls here in Peter Eastgate's shoes. If I had pocket 10s or pocket 2s, I would also call. There's no way you can have re-raises here. Simply speaking, you would just only be able to have those good value bets. Eastgate does decide to make the call. I don't hate that decision. I could see some logic for just folding here, being that this is one of the worst deuces you can have, and there were tons of people involved in the hand. But I also can't fault him for making the call with the deuce. Back over now to Barry Greenstein with the pocket aces. I don't really understand what Barry can do here other than fold. I mean, clearly, someone has a deuce. Either Tom Dwan has you beat or he's bluffing. Both are possible. But what does Eastgate have that Barry can beat? Name a hand. It's impossible because you're just beat. Really, what Barry is doing here by calling 27,000, he's going set mining on the turn, and if an ace comes, he's going to stack someone if they have, you know, something like ace, deuce, or pocket tens, but then he also does get stacked when someone has pocket twos. So this is just a very bad flop call. Anyway, Barry does call, and let's take a turn.
7 on the turn.
Peter and Barry check. Of the 3 players, Dwan has got the weakest hand.
Yeah.
Run out of Daniel jokes. I need you.
Gotta get a new book.
I need you to get some. Just wonder how long I can keep doing that.
You know, I've been so sick of writing for like a while now. I have a column that I write originally. This week I said, you know what, I'm done. I had 2 before.
He bets $104,200.
He's got the weakest hand, but the biggest heart. And Peter Eastgate says, well, what's going on here?
I never put poker hands on.
I got $500,000 in front of me. Do I want to risk it? I question what Dwan did on the flop, but right now I think he knows exactly where he's at.
Wow.
Peter Eastgate releases. He thinks, well, Dwan could very easily have ace deuce. And I'm not risking all this money. And Dwan realized that Peter Eastgate probably had a weak deuce. Now it's up to Barry.
The turn comes a 7, and Tom Dwan decides to continue firing. He's going to go ahead and represent that he has the goods. He decides to bet 104,000 into about 140,000, which does make sense. If Tom does have a full house here or quads, you would want to be betting big and building this pot. Now, Tom probably recognizes this in this situation that because he has a 10, Eastgate is likely to have a deuce. In fact, almost has to just have a deuce when he calls. And a hand like just a deuce is in a very bad situation here because unless he has ace deuce and might chop with some of Dwan's value bets, he just loses to the full houses or the better deuces. Because of this, it puts an immense pressure on Peter Eastgate with those kinds of hands. And if Tom thinks that Eastgate is playing way too loose pre-flop, there are a lot of deuces that simply can't continue. You add to the fact here that if, in fact, Barry doesn't have aces but rather has pocket tens or pocket twos, then, well, if he can't have pocket twos, if he has a deuce, you guys understand what I'm saying. If Barry has a full house here himself, then he's also dead behind. So not only does Eastgate have to be ahead of the range that Dwan is repping, which he could maybe beat, he also has to be ahead of the range that Greenstein continues with, which, you know, of course, he's likely to, given that Barry is so tight pre-flop, but sometimes Barry will have pocket tens. So it's really not that appetizing of a spot here in Peter Eastgate's shoes. And one more note, what worse hands can Eastgate really have here? What hand can he have worse than a deuce? I don't think there are any. What hand calls this flop raise out of the small blind? In fact, you could say that Eastgate is at probably his second worst hand. I think it's safe to say he's probably not folding the 3 deuce off pre. So I think in this situation, if Eastgate just wants to call when he has maybe ace deuce, maybe king deuce, but really probably just ace deuce or full houses, I think that is totally fine. He does fold, which was the best hand, and now the action's back over to Barry Greenstein. Barry put himself in this place by deciding to call on the flop. And the real problem here is that I think he got a little too hung up on the fact that Tom Dwan could be bluffing him, and he didn't really think about the fact Eastgate's behind as well. When you do have aces here, you block ace deuce, which is notable, but because you have the ace of clubs, you don't block ace deuce of clubs, you only block ace deuce of hearts. Tom Dwan realistically has ace deuce of diamonds, pocket tens, or pocket twos. So it's not that many combinations of hands, and realistically, you also know that Eastgate folded a deuce. There's no way Tom Dwan has pocket twos here because what did Eastgate call the flop with? So I think in this situation, if you wanted to call down with some aces, I think you'd really want to have ace of hearts, ace of diamonds, where you make it so that Tom Dwan can't even have ace deuce suited pre-flop, and then you would have some nice card removal when you're looking at calling down. As played, though, I certainly can't fault him for folding, especially when you consider the fact that Eastgate almost certainly had a deuce, and Tom Dwan had to decide bluff trips. Greenstein ultimately does make the laydown. Wait, actually, let's cancel that part. Before we watch how the end of this hand plays out, I got to say that it's unclear if Tom Dwan had an extremely sharp analysis of what everyone was doing here, or if he was just being really aggressive and got kind of lucky. Probably a little bit of both. And that's why I would say to you guys, when you're kind of confused with what to do, or you're maybe looking for tips on how to play poker, if you're going to do anything, lean towards being aggressive, because you might just get some better hands to fold.
Barry realizes that Tom Dwan's got quite an imagination, but does he have this much imagination? It's going to cost Barry his whole stack also, because he's not going to just call here, he's going all in.
Wow.
Barry throws it away.
You
can watch also daily Poker Go content on their YouTube channel, and you can also watch their entire offering of live streaming and episode releases for the World Series of Poker, high stakes poker, and much more over at a link in the description below. Thank you guys. I'll see you soon.